and also what you hope to get out of our session this evening. So maybe you came in with a particular question that you hope is answered for you. Maybe you want to connect with someone in particular, or just connect with someone new. Any of those things, go ahead and put that in the chat. Hey, Charlene, nice to see you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. For those of you just joining, we're just getting started by introducing ourselves in the chat. So your name, your role, you want to share where you're zooming in from, you can, and your hope for the session. All right, we'll give you another moment or so to introduce yourself in the chat. I see quite a few names here. Some familiar, some brand new. So welcome to those who are joining for the first time. We're happy to have you here as we grow our professional learning community. Thank you, Trelane. Welcome from Boston. All right, just generally want to learn more about neurodivergence. That's awesome. Thank you for that. All right, so we'll allow people to continue to share in the chat, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So again, welcome. I'm so excited to see so many folks here tonight. My name is Laureen Adams. I'm the Senior Director of Professional Learning with Ghana ASCD, and I am joined tonight by some of our team, Agnes and Jill, so we welcome you. The purpose of this webinar series is really to delve into topics that support leading and teaching in future-ready learner-centered communities. So we offer a webinar every month, the third Thursday from 7 to 8 p.m. And if you participate in this series, we hope that it will help strengthen your capacity to be a leader and teacher in learner-centered communities, that it will help you to learn strategies that you can easily apply in your context. And of course, we want you to expand and grow your network of a professional learning community. So be sure you connect with people here if there's someone new in this Zoom. So at Ghana ASCD, we are really committed to advancing collaborative capacity building and strengthening, and helping to form partnerships so that we can accelerate learning for educators and students. And some of the ways that we do that are by offering these free webinars. We have a Saturday PD series. We do consulting. We share an EdExpress newsletter every month, and we just started an online journal called Renew Ed, and our second issue will be coming out in November. We have a Saturday literacy program, and we have hosted 2 now International Educators Summits. And I'll talk more about how you can join Ghana ASCD at the end of our time together. All right, so for our time together this evening, we ask that you are engaged and collaborative. We would like to encourage people to enter the space with some curiosity as a learner. And as much as you can be tuned in, I know it's the evening for many of us here in Ghana, to stay present, be an active listener, listen to learn and to understand, and be respectful. So please make sure you stay muted during the presentations, and participate as you can in the Zoom, in the chat. And if there's an opportunity to talk out loud, please feel free. And also remember, this is a safe space. We're all coming here as learners and in community so that we can grow as educators and leaders. All right, so I'm going to introduce our presenters. I'm very excited about these wonderful experts we have in the space tonight. And just so you know the flow, each presenter is going to spend about 10 to 15 minutes talking, and then at the end, we'll have a Q&A for both of them. You're welcome to put your questions in the chat as they're presenting, but we'll hold space for Q&A at the end, okay? So our first presenter is Dr. Nikki Elliott. She serves as the director of the Center of Embodied Equity and Neurodiversity at University of San Diego's School of Leadership and Education Sciences, that's in the US. In this role, she leads the development of research projects and professional certificates for K-12 educators, school counselors, and college and university faculty. Prior to this appointment, she served for 7 years as the founding director of the Center for Neurodiversity, Learning, and Wellness at the University of La Verne, also in California in the United States. Her mission is to galvanize an education workforce that enables trauma-informed, neuro-inclusive learning communities where all students and educators thrive. Our second speaker is Justina Asafu Ajay, and she is an experienced educator and advocate specializing in inclusive practices and personalized learning. As programs coordinator at Nature Sprout Academy here in Accra, she designs and manages holistic programs for neurodivergent children, focusing on early intervention and transitions to mainstream education or homeschooling. As an education consultant, she collaborates with professionals, trains staff, and fosters inclusive environments while advocating for neurodiversity and empowering families globally. Again, both speakers are going to present right after one another, and then we'll have time for questions at the end. Please share your questions in the chat as they surface so that we can be prepared for that in the end of the presentations. Welcome to our dynamic speakers. I'm very excited to learn from you. And go ahead, Dr. Nikki.
Hello, good day. Thank you so much, Laureen, and to everyone from ASCD Ghana for this invitation to be with you all today and for this chance to talk about my very favorite topic around the needs of neurodiverse children. So in our time today, I was asked to share one or two most pressing best practices or levels of awareness that I think are critical for anyone serving neurodiverse children to understand. And so I'm happy to be able to do that today. And before I get into my primary best practice, I'd like to just set a grounding for what we mean when we define neurodiversity as a term, and how it is that I'm hoping that we can come to view neurodiverse children as learners and as significant contributors to culture. I love this quote. It's a proverb that says, no matter how long a log stays in the water, it will never be a crocodile. And I think that for educators, as we look at neurodiverse children, a lot of times, many of our efforts are toward therapies and things that would make them quote unquote normal. So a lot of the work and the lens around neurodiversity is about what can be done to quote unquote fix the individuals so that they can function within environments that are not being asked to change. And what we are promoting in this field of neurodiversity is this understanding that neurodivergent children, neurodiverse individuals have unique gifts and talents that they are able to bring forward if we can reconsider the expectation that they change and become something else, and that we explore more about how the environments that we create for them need to be adjusted in order for their best thriving. So this definition of neurodiversity, it was born in the autism movement, but has since expanded to include more diagnoses besides autism spectrum. But what I'd like to draw your attention to first is this understanding that we see neurodiversity as a natural variation in brain function and human behavior that expresses with both challenges as well as natural advantages. And again, to my prior point, a lot of the lens around neurodiversity are focused on what is perceived to be problems and challenges. And for many, those are real challenges. But what we often neglect to look at in this field are the natural advantages and strengths that also are embedded within the skill sets and the dispositions of these diagnoses. So what kind of diagnoses are included here would be, again, in addition to autism, ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. SPD is known as sensory processing disorder. HSP would refer to highly sensitive persons, which are very highly sensitized nervous systems within an environment. PTSD would reflect changes to the brain and nervous system as a result of trauma, as well as TBI, traumatic brain injury, which we do see oftentimes in veterans returning from war. We also see in athletes that have had high impact sports and damage to the brain and nervous system from that, as well as dyslexia. And it's really important to recognize as education providers that we often see, I would say about 75 to 80% of the time, that a person has a diagnosis around autism, ADHD, dyslexia, that we're also seeing co-occurring mental health diagnoses like anxiety and depression, and sometimes OCD. So this is a very layered and complex conversation when we take into account the full needs of these learners. And I want to share just a bit why this conversation about neurodiversity matters to me. Because again, from that strengths-based and growth-based perspective, we see that growth in the STEM field, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, especially the new booming field around artificial intelligence. We know in our creative fields, musicians, artists of all kinds, as well as those who are major players in the economic development field, and many of the top people that we consider quote unquote genius or elevated leaders in these fields are often individuals who identify as neurodivergent. We do consistently see in the research and in practice that there are higher rates of entrepreneurship, people who are great inventors and go on to create new industries. And that is also common among neurodiverse people. So it becomes important to me that people who have the gift of divergent thinking, out of the box thinking, creative and innovative ways of seeking novelty or approaching problem solving, that they get the support that they need, because I firmly believe that supporting these learners will lead us to the solutions that will solve our climate change issues, our social justice challenges come from great divergent minds when they are well supported. So in our work, I love to highlight Bruce Perry's neurosequential model, because most of us as educators were trained to understand a top-down kind of cognitive approach to learning, meaning that when we want children to learn something, we give instructions and we like open their brains open with the cranial can opener and pour in information and instructions, and that the mouth is told what to say, the hands are told what to do, and the body is told how to act. But what we understand through current education neuroscience is that learning is actually a bottom-up approach, so that our ability to access cognition, executive functions, and our reasoning skills comes on last. And so what do we attend to first if we flip that and look at a bottom-up understanding of how we support learning? From this perspective, we understand that our first responsibility is not to jump straight to cognitive demand, but to make sure that a student is experiencing what we call psychological and physical safety. Now, many of you who do a lot of work in SEL are very familiar with psychological safety and felt safety, but what we're talking about today also invites us to understand that people, neurodiverse individuals, their nervous systems are also registering environmental safety, meaning the cues from the physical space that they're operating in. So we have to look at physical safety between the child and the environment, psychological safety relationally in the child between them, the caregivers, as well as their peers, but also the ways in which the physical environment itself can be potentially setting off bells of alarm, which we'll get to in a moment. The second thing that we need to address is the brain's primary focus on a sense of belonging. So the idea that I have a place here within this community. And this becomes very critical, particularly for neurodivergent learners, because the research shows us that students with the types of diagnoses we just reviewed experience up to 20 times the amount of negative feedback and criticisms as their neurotypical or typically developing peers. And we see that being a part of the reason why some of those other mental health diagnoses around anxiety and depression can often be correlated. So really doing everything in your power to assure that state of belongingness and having rituals that really elevate what neurodiverse students are doing well really helps to quiet that part of the brain that sends off our danger responses. And when we have that sense of felt safety, that sense of belonging, then our brains are able to really engage the higher order thinking, the executive functioning, the impulse control, the time management, the memory, all the things that make for great learning. But without it, it's not possible. So in our work, we take an applied neuroscience approach, applied educational neuroscience approach to understanding the needs of neurodiverse learners. And that brings us to grounding our work in polyvagal theory in general, in particular, but then the vagus nerve and our understanding in general. And so many people have never seen an image of this nerve, but it is the longest nerve in our human body. And you can see that this bundle of yellow nerves touches every major organ in our body. And you can see down, if you look down at the bottom of the image around where the gut and intestines are, you see a large amount of innervation. And this is really important because for many people who serve neurodiverse learners, you will see often a lot of challenges around digestion. So you'll see children who have a lot of stomach aches, a lot of issues around being able to settle. We'll talk about that a little bit. And as it relates to mood as well, the research shows that 95% of the serotonin in our body is actually in the gut. And it's this vagus nerve that helps move that serotonin, dopamine, and the other health healing neurotransmitters from the gut to the brain to help balance mood, to help settle the nerves, and to help get us in a state for learning and for prosocial behavior and connection. So this nerve is super important, which is why we take this body first approach and understanding the needs of neurodiverse learners. So what we're needing in order to be able to settle and be able to comply with tasks, to focus, to be able to be connected with others and at a high level in learning, we need something referred to as high vagal tone, which means we need that vagus nerve to be strong, giving us the ability to have a flexible nervous system that can engage with a higher window of tolerance, to manage stressors within the environment, and to have strong bounce back ability. But what we see also in the research is that people with autism, ADHD, as well as those who have higher trauma exposure, often have what the research refers to as lower vagal tone, which means that yellow nerve we just looked at is less strong with them in being able to reset their bodies when they experience stress. So that results in a less flexible nervous system and a person who can experience more rigidity. That can make it harder to manage environmental stressors, harder to manage change or uncertainty within the environment. So when we're designing spaces that support the needs of neurodiverse learners, having consistency, having strong rituals and predictability with the environment is important and is critical for helping settle and support the nervous system state that allows them to experience healthy self-regulation. In addition, we know that these diagnoses often occur with strong sensory sensitivities. And the reason this is so important for you to recognize is because as an educator, it's critical that you become able to distinguish willful misbehavior, meaning a child is intending to be disrespectful or to throw things or to be loud and unmanageable in the space as a willful intention versus a child's nervous system has been stressed by something happening in the environment as a symptom of their diagnosis. So that becomes really critical. And in understanding that, one of the primary things that we need to understand is that sensory sensitivities are very significant with a large population of neurodiverse learners. So many of us were raised learning about 5 primary senses. So visual, sight, auditory is our hearing, olfactory, sense of smell, Gustatory is sense of taste. Tactile is touch. Vestibular is a sense of balance. So we know for many students who are neurodivergent, being able to flip upside down, to spin clockwise in the northern hemisphere, counterclockwise in the southern hemisphere, helps activate that vagus nerve. So many times when educators are not aware of these sensory sensitivities and a child is rocking or a child is spinning, the teachers are saying, stop. But what they're doing unknowingly is interrupting that child's innate sense of what it takes to activate that vagus nerve and help their body settle. Same thing with proprioception. Some neurodivergent children need strong sense of where my body is in space. So they may feel like they're crashing in for a hug, but it's not intention to harm, but their body, there's a lack of body awareness that needs to be supported and developed. Likewise with interoception, meaning my sense of what I'm feeling inside my body, my cues of hunger and taste. So each person has different types of sensitivities that affect them when they're in communal spaces. So for example, what we do and what I'm highly recommending as my one takeaway in our conversation today is that I'm always encouraging the teachers that I work with, whenever you are concerned about a student that you may perceive is neurodiverse or having strong kind of aggressive or shutdown behaviors within the classroom space, is to conduct something that we call a sensory inventory. And I have given Laureen a sample of a sensory inventory that was created by Kaiser Permanente, which is a hospital network here in the US. And I think they did a very good job of helping you as an educator or as a parent map a child's needs across all of their senses to understand what their sensory stressors are. So for example, here, and I'll end with this, I map for myself. Sensory visual wise, my nervous system is highly activated with flashing lights, fluorescent lights, spaces or classrooms where there's a lot of visual clutter, watching rapidly changing screens on a computer or any kind of 3D movie. Then after we understand the things that stress an individual in their sensory profile, then we understand what are their sensory helpers. So what are the things that when my nervous system is activated and it's difficult to manage my behavior, what things can I do that can help soothe that visual sense and help me settle my nervous system so that I can get back into connecting with that higher order thinking. And for me, that would be visual exposure to natural light, having a view of nature, having a classroom designed with more soothing colors rather than some of the loud primary colors that many classrooms, at least in the US, have. Dimmer switches, being able to dim the light and control the amount of light that I'm seeing also help. So in classrooms where we've implemented this, teachers have brought in simple things like these spinner chairs that allow children on the spectrum to be able to spin and rock in order to settle their nervous system so that they can cooperate and attend. As well as this is in an autism classroom for middle school. So students ages 12 to 14, they create a sensory tent where a student who's visually or sensory overwhelmed can come into here for about 5 minutes in order to settle, reset their nervous system, and to be able to come back to engage in learning. So I will look forward as I pass the microphone over to my colleague, being able to continue our conversation about more suggestions for the kind of adaptations we can make in classrooms to create more sensory friendly spaces for neurodiverse learners.
Thank you so much, Nikki. All right. Justina, are you ready?
Yes.
All right.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here, and it's a pleasure to join all of you. My name is Justina Asafwajay, and I'm the Programs Coordinator at Nature Sprout Academy. And I'm going to start with just telling you a bit about Nature Sprout Academy and then talking about what neurodiversity looks like in Ghana and some of the challenges that we are exploring and looking at how we can meet. And I'm hoping that it will generate a lot of discussion when we come to doing the Q&A. So apologies in advance. You haven't got a PowerPoint to look at. You're going to have the pleasure of my beautiful face for the next 10 minutes. but I will send through the PowerPoint to Lorraine, who will send it out to all of you. But that's just a technical issue on my side that's not allowing me to share. So thank you, and thank you for the love. So Nature Sprout Academy is a neurodiversity center based in Accra, Ghana. We've been running for just over a year now, and we are a holistic center that supports children and young people with neurodevelopmental delays. The majority of our cohort of students are on the spectrum in terms of autism, but we do have children with ADHD, learning disabilities, learning differences, and a lot of our children are undiagnosed, but we recognize that they are struggling in accessing an education and accessing the curriculum. And the support we give is to determine what is causing those barriers and those challenges. So we take children from 15 months right up to 18 years, and we currently have 34 children enrolled who attend daily. And the bulk of our work is supporting our children to overcome the challenges they experience in readiness and preparation for them to either start school or return to mainstream education or homeschooling, whatever the choice the family have made. So I'm so glad that Dr. Nikki went through neurodiversity and the context of it all, because that was going to be something that I went through. So it has set the tone really nicely. So in Ghana, one of the things that we are really working hard on is addressing the stigma that centers around neurodiversity and neurodivergent presentation. There is an intersection of cultural identity, knowledge and awareness, and practice that for a lot of organizations, they're kind of just starting to get their heads around. For us at Nature Sprout Academy, we are determined to break the stigma, and we are determined to empower families to celebrate the difference and the presentations of their children and young people. And that can be quite challenging, because if your child is presenting in terms of behaviors and expressions, and their ability to engage in learning is significantly delayed or looks different to the children that you are used to interacting, for a lot of our families, that is very, very, very difficult to manage. Ghana is a country that is very steeped in education. Education is a big deal, and educational attainment is a big deal. So when your child is not able to meet those attainment goals, it can present a challenge. And so a lot of the work that we do is around addressing the stigma and addressing the ableism that attaches itself to stigma. So one of the issues that we have is we have this assumption in the world that there is a normal, and there are normal people. And because we have that assumption around neurotypical individuals, neurodivergent individuals are continually being shaped and programmed and forced to present in a way that actually isn't natural to who they are. And how do we do that? We do that through active training of professionals. We do that through engagement with families, through workshops, through experiences. And we do a lot of things like this where we're talking to professionals and we're engaging in different platforms to share the knowledge and raise the awareness around the strength, the beauty, the diversity that is amongst us who are neurodivergent, and also the undiscovered competencies that exist. So learning to celebrate differently and learning to look at achievement and progress in a more broader term, rather than test sheets and test scores. So at Nature Sprout Academy, we promote multisensory teaching. And so all of our classrooms, all of our classroom experience look at the nurturing of each individual across all of their senses. So all the senses that Dr. Nikki talked through are part of our daily timetable and experience. So you will hear staff regularly saying, right, we're off to do our vestibular activity. We all of that is part of the child's daily experience, because we recognize that in order to support children to achieve and to operate fully in their prime, we have to look at them as holistic beings. And that holistic being centers around not just what their school experience looks like, but who they are as people, their physical being, their health and well-being, as well as their interests and the nurturing of it. So our therapies look at play therapy, for example, music, movement, and art, animal therapy. We look at biomedical profiles in addition to behavior analysis. And we construct a program for each child that's individualized, because we recognize that the one size fits all education system that kind of has dominated the world doesn't work for our neurodivergent learners. And we have to really start to think and present learning experiences very, very differently. And so adopting a multisensory approach really allows all children to be able to engage in learning effectively, and allows them to be nurtured and supported, so that their emotional regulation is as important as any behavior outcomes. So, looking at how we address stigma and ableism is about challenging some of these misconceptions, challenging the expectations that are placed on neurodivergent young people and children, and getting the wider community, including the families, to have a better understanding of the why. So, Dr. Nikki took us through all the behavioral presentations that you might see and what the underlying reasons for those behavior presentations could be. And so one of the key things that we really stress on is the importance of understanding why. What is contributing to behaviors that you are seeing? Why is that behavior present? And once we have a good understanding of the why, it's a lot easier then to plan and accommodate for the child's needs with that understanding and with that context. So we are the first neurodiversity centre in Ghana. We are actively working with a professional body to grow and expand our community. And so we do that through networking events for professionals. So we hosted this year the first ever Senko networking event in Ghana, where we brought Senkos from different schools across Accra to come together. Some joined from outside Accra and outside of Ghana online, to share knowledge and share experience, and look at how do we celebrate diversity? How do we recognize diversity? How do we plan for neurodiverse thinking within our spaces and within our cohorts of young people that we are working with? And so our professional commitment is very, very strong. And platforms like this are a great space to be able to speak about, what do we actually do? What does celebrating neurodiversity actually look like in real terms? What do we do in our schools, in our classrooms, in our homes? How do we ensure that the language we use, for example, is neuroaffirming? How do we make sure that our ableist attitudes that we have all grown up with are addressed and reflected on and reviewed and changed and adapted? And so, to kind of bring me to an end, I think I'm coming up to my end of my 10 minutes. Um, Key things that we are very keen to see happen is we want to see policy and systems changed. We want to see educators trained on inclusion and stigma awareness. We want to see strengthened policies implemented where there is actually accountability for the professionals that are working with young people. Because those of you that are in America, my background is in the UK, we have systems of accountability that holds us in check as practitioners and professionals. It's about bringing that into the Ghanaian context and the Ghanaian space as well in a real and meaningful way. And it's about building frameworks across education, health, and work, because children do not stop being neurodivergent when they enter adulthood. Neurodivergent children grow into adults. So how do we support our adults? How do we support our adults in the workplace and in society? And what systems do we need to put in place? And what language changes and what attitudinal changes do we need to ensure that we are bringing into the wider society, so that the children that we are supporting so brilliantly in their early years grow up and enter into a society that sees them, recognizes them, allows them to have a sense of belonging, and allows them to have a meaningful way of contributing towards society. So one of the things that I always like to ask people to do is, identify one thing that you can do to reduce stigma in the coming week. What part can you play in reducing stigma and challenging ableism? And how can you do that respectfully? And also, how can you become involved with organizations like Nature Sprout Academy to share your experience and your skills and your knowledge to help that movement of empowering a nation and spreading that out to a continent so that we actually find a space where neurodivergent children and young people can flourish and can be their true selves, really freely and intentionally be able to celebrate them. So that brings me to the end of my session. I hope I didn't go over time, Lorraine, and I hope I'm not too under time either. So I'll hand back over to you.
Thank you so much, Justina. No, that was perfect. Thank you. We have a few questions in the chat. I think I'll start with those, and then I have a few as well. And I hope that we can spend a couple of minutes at least celebrating the beautiful institution that you work at here in Ghana, because Nikki, Jill, who's also on the call, myself, and another colleague were able to visit it this past, I think it was July, and we were able to see all these beautiful things in practice. So I want to hold out a little time for that as well. But let's go to the chat first. There's a question from Cledis around how can we make sure that we're actually celebrating neurodivergence as a form of diversity in our schools, and it's specifically directed to Dr. Nikki, but Justina, you're welcome to answer it as well.
Okay.
No problem.
Thank you. I think one of the biggest things that I have found in my work that helps elevate the natural gifts and strengths of neurodiverse learners, divergent learners, is to kind of shift and create space for something that's referred to as open mode thinking. So the understanding around that is that we see consistently that neurodiverse learners can be strong systems thinkers, strong out of the box thinkers, strong entrepreneurial thinkers, strong visionary thinkers. Yet our curriculum is not designed to test for those things or to support the growth of the ways in which their brains excel. So when schools are focused primarily in designing learning around closed mode thinking, which is the regurgitation of information, recitation, memorization, fill in the blank questions with closed answers, then we don't get to see the brilliance of neurodiversity that could be celebrated. So I've actually been training my teachers. I don't know how prevalent the use of ChatGPT or Gemini or other AI instruments is in Ghana. My apologies, I meant to get clarity on that before the call. But if you all are able, what I'm training teachers that I'd work with to do is to take a lesson plan that they are designing and then to ask for help to redesign that lesson to include open mode concepts. So something that they can build, questions that don't have a final answer, a story rather than summarizing how the story goes to create an alternate ending to the story. So again, when we change the way learning is designed to have goals that are around invention, building, innovation, novel ways of thinking or approaching problem solving, your neurodiverse learners' scholarship and capability will rise to the top, and it will start to shift the narrative while we also are providing support for the real challenges like the ones that I've shared that also can go along with those diagnoses.
Thank you for that. Justina, do you want to add?
No, I think Dr. Nikki answered that so perfectly. No, I'm not going to add to that. That was actually
Okay. So the second question is directed to you, and I feel like it builds off of that question as well. Curious to know what emerging tools or approaches hold the most promise for supporting neurodivergent learners in Ghanaian schools.
Yeah. So a lot of work has been undertaken in the last year to 2 years around the importance of tech within education, and how tech can be used to support learners. And within the inclusion space, we recognize that tech can be an absolute game changer for neurodivergent learners in allowing them to share and present their thoughts and ideas in meaningful ways that are not reliant on writing and reading. Obviously, there is still a lot of kind of skepticism and fear around the use of tech and what that looks like, but there's also logistical and practical barriers in terms of, not everywhere has really stable, strong internet access that allows for the full use of text to be predominant. And there's also a socioeconomic um, element to accessing of tech. Within our inclusion policy, the universal design for learning, I would say, is the approach across Ghana in terms of looking at multisensory teaching, learning delivery that allows access to education and learning for all children. So I would say that's probably the most prominent approach that we have, that schools are still kind of getting their heads around. There's still a lot of work to have that embedded as a fundamental part of teacher training and teacher delivery. But I would say those are the two areas that in Ghana have really taken prominence in terms of the discussions that we're having and the work that's taking place, is the introduction of tech and the universal design for learning being across the board.
Mhm.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. Justina, you mentioned something about the importance of using neuroaffirming language in schools. And I'm just curious if either of you can speak to some examples or provide some examples of what that might sound like, because that's something easy that we can take away and start doing in our context.
Yeah. Yeah, so using neuroaffirming language simply talks about talking from a strengths-based model of being. So looking at what children can do rather than focusing on what children can't do, using language that speaks to the strengths. So understanding that we think differently and that that's okay, you know. Um, there is no one way of being, and so rather than having groups of people, so you have, you know, the neurodivergent learners and then you have the neurotypical learners, actually, how about we are all learners and we all have strength in that space, and we all deserve to be respected and regarded and have that sense of belonging, that whatever we have to share, there is meaning and there is value in that being received. And so in Ghana, it's very much moving away from this, the labeling language and the critique that comes along with looking at what a child can't do, and focusing more on actually how the effort that they've put in and the different ways that they can do it, and celebrating those different ways that they present their knowledge and their skills and their ideas. So that's what I kind of, from what I'm sharing.
Got it. Thank you.
I would just add one thing to it. I know in my work, you know, neurodiversity is considered the umbrella term, like we're all neurodiverse. But when we are speaking of the learners with the diagnoses that we're covering today, then the field uses neurodivergent. So for me, I push back on that in my own work, because to refer to someone as neurodivergent, and this is what I'm working through in my mind, and that there's some norm that someone has diverged from, and so they're
Yeah.
off the center. And so I intentionally in my work use neurodiverse consistently, and I'll say neurodiverse individuals who may have a diagnosis of, so that there is no center that we're norming people as being off of. So again, and then again, as it relates to, you know, a lot of the socio-emotional learning work comes out, and everything is about self-regulation, regulation, and co-regulation. This idea, I regulated their nervous system, as if we are turning the dial on someone like a machine to turn the dial up higher or lower. And we have to remember that all neurodiverse affirming language is relational, whereas these ideas around regulating nervous systems is like mechanical, like we're acting on someone rather than being in relationship with someone. Because a lot of what we find in the work is adult nervous system capacity is the foundation for relationships that start to support the development of a neurodiverse child's nervous system over time. So that's just one thing, like how even just the way we're using the words in the field, and what impact that has on where we're thinking a student is standing from positionality wise.
Thank you for
I
that. So
love
we can
that.
revise the title of our session tonight to Honoring Neurodiversity.
Mhm.
Thank you.
No.
Yes.
Can I just add something quickly on the back of that? And I recognize that for a lot of our language, it is shaped by the medical model. And so there is so much unlearning that all of us have to do, even those of us in the field, because historically what the foundation of our knowledge is stem it's there's a medical model, but then there's also the Western interpretation. So then when
Mhm.
you bring that then into the Ghanaian context, there is so much unraveling and unlearning that you need to do. And it's a continual thing. And I think there is never a time where you get to a space where you know it all and you have that understanding. I think it's having the recognition to be able to say, actually, I have to look at this from the lens of the community that I'm working with, and
Mhm.
does it fit? And if it doesn't fit, what else can there be? How else can we do it so that we are affirming continually? Because we might think we are, but we're not, because we get fixated on the terms.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you for that.
Absolutely.
I have one more question, and then I want to go to talk about the amazing work you're doing at Nature Sprout. Um, Dr. Nikki, you mentioned the importance of having routines if you're in the classroom for your learners. Can you give some examples of what uh, a few routines teachers might use to create a sense of like normalcy, I guess, I don't know what word to use, for their learners so that they're comfortable and feeling regulated. I'm trying to
Yeah.
use the words that you just
I understand. I mean, it's nothing we're going to argue about, right? So I don't want to like over police a conversation around the wording, but it's just something that we're always thinking about as we grow together. Um, but for example, many times we see escalations of behaviors, of strong behaviors with neurodiverse children, and the adults are not aware that the antecedent or the cause of that behavior was something that was done to the child in the environment. So for example, um, having when you say there's 10 minutes for this activity and then we're going to transition, and if a child is building things and the teacher can't come back in 3 minutes and go, oh, I'm sorry, let's go now, the principal came and we need to switch to this other thing, and then the child is having a meltdown. So again, it's being able to be consistent with the things that have been promised, or negotiating or asking, okay, Laureen, I know we said 10 minutes, but this thing has happened, so we need to make a change. And I promise you, no one's going to disturb the project that you're working on, right? So, but a lot of times people don't think historically as children, and our generation, many of us were not given that amount of deference or respect from an adult to have our boundaries and our needs negotiated. So it's very foreign for a lot of adults to understand that the routines that I come in the classroom, I hang my coat, we do a mind body practice, we do homework. So those rhythms that make predictability help quiet the amygdala because it knows what to expect. So those fear responses are quieted. So again, visual calendars and visual reminders are super important for a lot of our learners. So not to overwhelm with verbal instructions. So remembering that auditory sound sensitivity is a significant challenge for many of our neurodiverse learners. And sometimes as educators, we're too talk heavy in our instruction as well as in our demands. So having those things listed as visual cues and visual calendars. Also having countdown timers. So a lot of our neurodiverse learners are time blind. So if they're in, their dreamy state, they're not necessarily in line with, okay, we said this was going to take 5 minutes. So visual calendars, countdown calendars, things like that help provide the scaffolding for executive functioning support, executive functioning skills, but also help students understand the rhythm of how the classroom works.
Yeah.
Great. That's super helpful. Thank you very much.
You're
And I
welcome.
think this is a great segue into putting some of these things into practice and what it actually looks like at the amazing Nature Sprout Academy here in Accra, Ghana. And so, Jill, if you're inclined to join us in this part, we'd love to just kind of share our experiences visiting Justina's beautiful school. And then Dr. Nikki, I know there are a lot of things that excited you as well, if you want to highlight this.
Well, we were so pleased that you invited us to come and tour the campus. It was just an absolutely beautiful, joyful place. We saw all the things that you just described, from calm, soothing colors to, a decor that was just cleverly designed, just soothing and calming. Lots of resources to help folks know exactly what to expect, but not at all busy. And I particularly liked the nature theme. You had kind of a lot of natural materials, and the library has a giant tree in the center with bookshelves on it. So I would just love to hear you say more about some of the design choices and how you were able to create such a beautiful space.
Yeah, would love to. Okay, so as per the name Nature Sprout Academy, the philosophy we have there is that the understanding that nature is a great healer, teacher, environment, and so it feeds through all of the spaces. So all of the spaces are designed to allow children to feel that they have autonomy within the space, they have freedom of movement within the space, and they have all of the stimulation that they need, but it's not too much. They're not going to be overstimulated there. So our philosophy is that the children spend 80% of their time outside and 20% inside. And it's very much about recognizing children at their point of presentation. For some children, they need a huge amount of vestibular activity. They need a huge amount of movement. And so we facilitate that by making sure that all of the spaces, they can just freely move through them at will. We do a lot around music and movement. And so, even go back to what you were saying, Nikki, in terms of instructions, a lot of our instructions we try and sing because we understand the power of music and melody and how that, really supports receptive language. Um, we do a lot of work around predictability and allowing them autonomy. So in Ghana, it's quite an un-Ghanaian way of doing things because as Ghanaians, we're quite adult authority focused. And so it's very much, this is what the adult says to do. So the example you gave, Nikki, of, a child who's doing something and then the schedule has to change. So before, what would happen is the schedule has to change and the schedule has to change. And we've done a lot of work to get people to understand that actually children, even when they're pre-verbal, still have autonomy, and it's really important to allow them that autonomy. And so you have to pre-warn them and give them processing time. And for our children, we need extra processing time, and very clear, explicit instructions before we can hope to move them on. And it's really important that the adults understand that sometimes it's the adult's behavior that is the precipitator of the behaviors in the children.
Mhm.
And so, really making sure that we are not the problem. There's enough challenges that the children have to be overcoming without us and our inflexibility as adults and our need to control what's happening as adults being part of the barriers that children are having to overcome. So yeah, that's kind of underpins our philosophy and our culture of working.
Thank you for that. I also recall learning some new things I was unfamiliar with about gut health. Can you talk a little bit about the role that gut health plays in your school?
Yeah, it plays a huge part. We put gut health as probably 80% of the reason our children make the progress that they do. And it's essentially the understanding that um, the relationship between the gut and the brain has significant influence over the presentations of our children. And thankfully, a lot of research and data has been coming out in recent months that really supports the understanding that um, children, particularly autistic children, there are some responses that they have physiologically that really influences things like language development, moods, behavior, presentation. And so most of our children are on a program where we look at how to reduce the toxin load that they have and increase the healthy bacteria within in their bodies. And by increasing the healthy bacteria and reducing their toxin loads, the brain inflammation that comes from the toxins that they receive from the foods that they eat, the cleaning products used in their environment, the products they use on their skin, creates an inflamed brain. And so when we reduce that inflammation in the brain, we see that these blockages that the children had experienced, where they weren't sleeping very well, or their language wasn't developing, or their focus and attention was really poor, or their moods were really extreme, or they had really poor bowel movements, we see those things start to go as we increase um, fruit, basically vegetables and fruit, an increase of vegetables and fruits, removal of ultra processed foods, removal of gluten and dairy, seed oils, things that generally we understand now as a society are actually not really good for us, but for our children, they're extremely not good for us. So we very, very much believe in that, and it's a big cornerstone of the program that we run. And we've seen what would only be classed as miracles, children who are speaking for the first time at 8, 9, 10, saying mummy for the first time. um, Children who were picky eaters and would literally eat three things are now eating a variety of fruits and vegetables and kale and quinoa and meats, and that they would never touch before. Children who are now sleeping through the night, and the impact that's had on parents. We've had parents who've been able to return to the workplace because they actually have a space that they know their child is safe and cared for. Their child is sleeping through the night. They are not exhausted in the day. They are not having to deal with the amount of behaviors that they were having to before. And they now are able to start a life, or return back to a life that they thought actually was lost. They thought they would have to be, full-time carers for their children for the foreseeable future, and now they don't. So we're really excited about what we're seeing. Yeah.
So amazing. Thank you. I want to be mindful of time because we have just a couple minutes left. But Dr. Nikki, I know I saw your face light up with joy when we were at the academy, and I just want to give you a moment, if you have a moment left, to share your takeaways from our visit.
Okay, so may I ask permission to share photos from your school site, Justina?
Absolutely, we'd love it.
So, as an educator, I spend a lot of time in schools where
Oh,
children
love
on the
this.
spectrum and neurodiverse children are served. And interestingly enough, in the United States, many school sites are removing play devices like this kind of the merry-go-rounds and the balancing and the monkey bars, where students can be upside down out of abundance of caution, and a lot of legal litigation fears around safety. But these are critical tools that help support vestibular balance and get a child who is neurodiverse able to settle their nervous system enough to come back in the classroom to settle. So this excited me so much. So you can see Dr. Berg and I were having a great moment on that. And then inside the classrooms, what I'm loving here, a lot of times classrooms are very overwhelming. So many, again, culturally is different in different places, but a lot of times, particularly in the US, we're encouraged a lot around primary colors, like the overuse of primary colors, and that the walls have to be covered from ceiling to floor with posters and things as evidence that work is happening. But that can be a gross overstimulation of the sensory system for neurodiverse learners. So research does show that grays, greens, and blues are the colors that are most palatable to the autistic eye, and then 30 to 40% negative space. So that's what I see in this classroom. Again, nature and nature analogs in the space. Enough spaciousness between students, and the placement of objects is really organizing to the nervous system. But still, you still do see some visual stimulation and interest that's at the level of children to reach and handle on their own. A lot of times I'm in schools where are serving children on the spectrum in particular, things are placed up high again, that's not assuming competence for the children. And so they don't have autonomy to reach and grab. And so you see pencils, pens, all the classroom materials and supplies are within reach for the students to show their competence and to be autonomous. So it was just so much more. Like literally everywhere I turned, the hammocks to be able to rock. I've never been in a school seeing a hammock as an option for students to soothe their nervous system and to settle during a break time. So Justina, I just want to elevate and just celebrate everything that you are doing, and just to continue to encourage your colleagues, the educators in Ghana, to come and visit and to be a part of your movement. And I'm sharing it the same with educators here in the United States, because contrary to cultural stereotypes, we really have a lot of work to do to better serve our neurodiverse students here in the US. So I look forward to our continuing partnership.
Oh, I love that.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much. And we would love to have, please, any of you and as many of you that would want to come down. We are ready and waiting. We'd love to have you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Dr. Nikki, and thank you, Justina, for sharing your brilliance with us. There were a lot of takeaways. I'm going to highlight a few and then let everyone know who's joining us that we will share these resources in our communication to you and also on our YouTube site. But we heard about the importance of using neuro-affirming language, in particular neurodiversity as opposed to neurodivergence. That was an important takeaway for me. We learned about the importance of using open mode thinking so that we can really honor all of the great thinking that our neurodiverse students bring that might not be captured in more of those rote types of ways we do teaching and learning and sometimes assessment. We also heard about the importance of gut health and how that connects to well-being and supports healthy guts, support our neurodiverse learners, and the importance of providing some routines and structures, and also allowing our learners to kind of tell us what they need if we have to make adjustments, and not just making adjustments for them without their permission. So thank you so much for that. I'm going to invite folks who are still able to stay with us to just give us a little feedback. I have a short poll because we're also trying to learn about what's serving you all and what we can do better here. And as you are completing the poll, I will go ahead and share a little bit about what's coming up for us and how you can join Ghana ASCD. So as I mentioned at the top of our call, we have monthly webinars every third Thursday of the month from 7 to 8 p.m. GMT. Our next webinar is around the STEAM Advantage, and we have two speakers, one Stephen Loya from the STEAM Innovation Foundation in Lagos, Nigeria, and Aaron Akwaboah from TTEL here in Ghana, talking about how we can incorporate STEAM into our schools. And then okay, so if you join Ghana ASCD, there are some wonderful benefits, which include access to our monthly newsletters. Of course, you'll know about our webinars and any upcoming professional learning opportunities. And then for our paid professional learning, you will receive a discount, including any conferences that we put on as well. So you can check out our website to learn more about that. I always like to close out our sessions with appreciations. You all took your time to join us, and for some of us this evening, and we're trying to wind down for the night, or we're taking it away from our family time. So thank you so much. I really want to thank our amazing presenters for sharing again your brilliance and your expertise with us. And feel free to drop any appreciation into the chat. Thank you for the people completing the poll. We'll keep it open for another minute or so. And if you have to go, I just want to leave with, again, thanking you for spending your time with us, and want to make sure you stay in touch. These are the ways you can stay in touch with us at Ghana ASCD, and we look forward to being in community with you all in the future. Have a good rest of your day or evening, and please be well. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Oh, Lorene, that was amazing. You so much.
Thank you
Thank
also.
you.
Yeah.
Oh, I appreciate it.
Great.
We can do more.
Someone called me Dr. Asafweje. From your lips to his ears. Yes, one day we will definitely have it.
Yes.
Thank you all so much.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
if you have anything that you'd like me to share with the folks who came, some people didn't come, and I'll still send out the
Okay.
Yeah,
resources
I'm
for
gonna
people
send
to
you.
register.
I'm gonna email you the PowerPoint that I couldn't share.
All right.
That you could
Sounds
share with them. That'd be great. Yeah, and then what I'll do is I'll actually put some specific information in there about some of the strategies that we use, like all the stuff that Nikki was talking about. I'll add it to there with examples and pictures, I think, so that they'll, yeah.
awesome. Thank you both so much. I won't keep you any longer because we're a little over,
No
and I'll be in touch.
Yeah.
All right. Hope
Appreciate
that
you.
met
All
your
right.
need,
Take
your goals
care.
for the
Have a
Very
great
much
evening.
so. Exceeded. All right. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye.